Hi friends, the title of today's video is Self-Permission, the Art of Claiming Space for Your Self-Expression. I had this huge light bulb moment recently where it occurred to me that in almost every single one of my sessions that I have with clients and also just casually in conversations with people that I know and love, there's this universal theme that starts to surface amongst everybody on exactly this subject of self-permission, permitting ourselves to exist in the world, permitting our voice to be heard in the world, permitting our work to be useful and helpful and valuable in the world. As a culture, I'm now convinced, we are trained to not permit ourselves to exist and instead sort of apologize for ourselves and keep ourselves small and keep ourselves quiet and to not really express the interior of ourselves in the world in terms of the inspiration that we have, the visions that we have, whether it's art, whether it's business, whether it's service, whether it's love, whether it's poetry, whether it's some sort of idea, whether it's a desire to get together with people or to reach out to somebody. We are conditioned to keep ourselves small. And yet there is a small subsection of people that you see online who do not suffer from this problem and are totally willing to put themselves online, are willing to project their voice out in the world, and they suffer the opposite problem where they're not concerned about the value or the utility of what they're putting out. There's just this sense of like, I'm just gonna fill the world with my noise. And in a way, it's a blessing that there are people out in the world who are able to just, put out work, even if it's not, maybe all the way thought through, or they haven't really deeply considered the value of what they're offering. But a lot of other people, probably such as yourself, who look at these people out in the world and say, oh, like, I'm so against people who feel comfortable just sharing content on the internet and putting their art out into the world. It leaves such a bad taste in my mouth that it's so off-putting that I vow not to be that. I vow to stay a little bit more quiet, a little bit more humble, as a reaction against these. And I will be ever so careful about putting something online or expressing myself in the world to the point where maybe I won't do it unless I absolutely have to or unless I'm absolutely sure. But then what happens is that we will be filled with so much judgment about bad art that we see out in the world that when we begin to create something with the intention of posting it, publishing it online, there's this critic in the back of our minds that will just yammer away while we're making the thing and then make it so difficult to focus because every single sentence we type or every phrase of music we put, like that voice says, no, it's not good enough, it's terrible, they won't like it, it's unoriginal, and whatever is the particular criticism, that will run into a blockage where it becomes, there's such a buildup of tension inside, and it just feels so unpleasant and kind of pressury that we just end up procrastinating and we end up putting the project on the back burner, and in some cases we just never return to it. We kind of promise to return to it one day, but we never do, and then that becomes the story of us. And so that is the import of what we're talking about here, because I've begun to see and realize that the possibility of a person going their entire lives with their valued expression, with their inner most important gifts, their dormant, unexpressed potential, just goes unexpressed. A person goes from birth to the grave and it just goes unexpressed. They never feel totally comfortable to put it out into the world where it can be seen and it can be received and cherished and appreciated. And my point of view on the matter is that most, if not all, people have a version of their own unexpressed potential that if they were to express it and if they were to trust in the goodness and in the truth and the value of their expression, everybody would benefit. To me, it is the one type of event that everybody benefits from. It's like an explosion of value. It's the person offering the value, the people receiving the value. When there's, true flow and true creativity, there's newness, there's fresh insight, there's a healing effect that often takes place. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see, the more the better. And that's why you'll see so many of these videos, if you watched any of my other stuff, is about this very particular important crossroads, about getting you into a place where you are willing to permit yourself. You give yourself permission to exist personally and to allow your work to be manifested and created and be visible and be public so that people can see it. And not just stuff that is filler stuff that is a copy of somebody else's, but your real interior, letting your real interior be seen. So all of that comes down to self-permission. And again, I just want to emphasize, if you don't master this, if you don't get to the bottom of this in your own world, in your own life, then your innermost potential won't be expressed. It can't be expressed. How could it be? How could you allow yourself to play at a higher level and ascend your operation to the higher echelons of success as you envision it if you are unwilling or are unable to express yourself completely and authentically? So if it's your desire to really create this freedom in yourself, to create a lifestyle for yourself that you would like to see, then mastering this is absolutely essential. So self-permission. Permission for what exactly? So I've hinted at this already, but I have a few important things that we need to permit ourselves to do. And we need to, as I'll detail a little bit later, we need to really disabuse ourselves of this idea that this permission can come from anybody other than ourselves. In other words, the permission to do the following things that I'm about to list can only come from you. It can't come from anybody else. And the sooner that you can really see that, the sooner that you can really internalize it down to your core as something that you know to be true, the better. Permission to exist. Do you feel like you have permission to exist? Permission to be seen? Do you give people permission to look at you? Do you give yourself permission to be in the limelight, on the stage, on the screen, in somebody's presence? Permission to be heard? Do you give permission to your voice to be in somebody's earpiece, somebody's headphones, somebody's speakers, somebody's ears? Do you give permission to your words to be heard and to land in somebody's mind? Permission to be acknowledged. Do you give yourself permission to be acknowledged by others? By people that you love, by people that you know, by strangers? Permission to participate. Have you given yourself sufficient permission to participate in whatsoever realm you're attracted to? There is a line that I heard from the speaker Terence McKenna. I went on a rampage of listening to his stuff at one point in my life. He likes to talk a lot about psychedelics and the interior subjective space, politics, among a few others. Fascinating, fascinating fellow. And unfortunately, I forget the bulk of the details, but he was telling a story about how he and a friend were attending a concert, possibly for the Doors. I feel like it was the Doors. And they entered from an angle toward the arena where they saw some of the roadies, like taking the speakers and whatever out of the truck and putting them into the venue. And it became clear to them all at once that they could write themselves into the story. And that was how he worded it. I loved this quote. I love this way of thinking about it. We could have written ourselves into the story, could have walked in as if we belonged, because this concept of belonging is thoroughly subjective. Who belongs, who doesn't belong. There's no rule anywhere in the world about who belongs where. That's written in the universe itself. And you can participate. You can be a roadie for the Doors. Not anymore, but you could have. So I'd like for you to boot up that software as we go through this. What realm, what circle of activity, what arena, what group of people, what sort of environment do you wish to participate in? Where would you love to be? Allow your imagination to wander. What sort of environment would you like to be in? What sort of goings-on would you like to participate with? Do you have permission to participate there? And then finally, and this is not an exhaustive list, there could be more added later, but permission to be valued and valuable. Do you feel you have permission to be valued and valuable? Do you feel like you have value? Do you feel like your work and your contributions have value? Have you been told that they do or don't? I was told in the beginning that my contributions don't have value. My vocation as a productivity coach began as me as a kid giving unsolicited advice to people all the time. And that didn't go so well. Sometimes it was well received. It was every once in a while. But if you just go around giving advice to people and telling people how to live their lives, you're going to miss more than you hit. And eventually the feedback came back, and like the feedback was gentle, but they had to keep turning up the volume. They being like everybody, they had to keep turning up the volume until I could finally hear it, where they're like, Brent, shut up. I'm not interested. I got this. And then I went through this whole period of assuming I didn't have value, that my ideas and my advice and my insight wasn't interesting or helpful or valuable. And then that shut me up for a long time. But then there was something in me that wanted to show up this way, that there was something in me to express. I wanted to offer these insights, both in the form of a YouTube channel, public speaking style, but also on a one-on-one basis. And then I learned to wait for people who actually requested the help. And then, to my great surprise and incredulity, I learned that some of my help was valuable. It was a shocking discovery. It was then that I was very fortunate, because from other people I learned how to be valued and how to appreciate my value, how to see myself as valuable. If I could speak to myself back then, I would teach myself how to insource this kind of message. I would teach myself how to decide this on my own. And that would save me from tons and tons of heartache, tons of trial and error, tons of confusion. So, when we're talking about self-permission, what are we talking about? We're talking about the insecurity that stops a person from putting something in the world. We're talking about freeing ourselves from the need to gain approval or to be perceived in a certain way. I was thinking of a few exercises that I could give you to bring this material to life. You could do this in the form of just a simple contemplation. You could do it right now, like I'll give you the question. You could pause the video and just stop and think about it, contemplate. You could journal. I personally love journaling. I love journaling prompts. And if you're like this, then you could also use it as a journaling prompt. And the exercise is this question: who possesses the ability to liberate me? And what could they say that would liberate me? So what is meant by liberation? What could somebody say to you that you would finally feel valid? You would finally feel seen. You'd finally feel acknowledged. You'd finally feel like you made it. Is it one person? Is it one person that you look up to? Your big brother? Teacher? Professor? Your idol? A musician? Somebody you look up to? A business owner? A CEO? Parent? Is it a group of people? Is it, people leaving comments on your stuff? Is it a certain number of followers? Is it a particular type of certificate that you could receive, or a sort of a prize or a medal or a trophy that somebody could give to you? A person, or an acting body, whoever gives away Nobel Prizes, whoever are these people that give away an Oscar. Who has the ability to validate you? Who has the ability to liberate you? Who has the authority to tell you about your worth, your value? Because a central theme that I want to offer here is that as you journal this out, as you contemplate this, if you find anything coming up for you, and by the way, if the answer is like nothing, don't just stop there. Like keep going. Really honesty, dig to find who can liberate you. The central theme, the thesis that I'm offering here is nobody has the authority to give this to you. In fact, what's happening is whatever it is that you're hoping to win from somebody else or you're waiting to get from somebody else, all it represents is your own authority, your own self-permission that you have invalidated and have given to somebody else, projecting it on them, and then are trying to get it back by winning it, by working for it, by earning it. But the problem there is that it was never theirs to give. And then what you'll find, what a lot of us find, is that when you do get it, aside from this momentary hit of satisfaction of like, I've made it, it tends to wear out because we're not in the habit of giving it to ourselves. And nobody has that authority. When we project our authority and our permission, our ability to give and revoke permission on somebody else, we put them above us and we put ourselves below them. So a different way of coming at this question is, honestly, who do you see yourself as below? Who are you beneath? Who are you above? All of this being just a mental construct, none of it being true. We're also talking about embodying the thing that you wish to become and acting accordingly. Sean Covey has an exercise. So this is exercise number 2. If you're interested in how, again, like things that you can do to make this happen, because I want you to come out of this with stuff that you can work with. Stephen Covey, not Sean. Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He, in habit number 2, which is begin with the end in mind, he offers an exercise, which is visualize everybody coming to your funeral. And you have your dad, you have died, your dad, and everybody's at your funeral, and everybody's crying and weeping, and everybody's giving eulogies about you. And so stop, freeze the frame. What would you hope that people had said about you at your funeral? And go all the way into it. Like if you just left the best possible impression on these people that you love in your life, what would they say about you? And what would your legacy be? And write all that down, because that is just valuable stuff. Write it all down. And then when you're done, look at this list and recognize it as your own. On one hand, it's your own unexpressed potential, but it's not even your unexpressed potential. It is your own attributes. It's like it's the stuff that you project out onto the world, onto other people that you put above you. But all of this is your own stuff for you. It's your own self as you are that you're describing, where if you were willing to embody it all now, then you could just begin embodying it immediately. This is such a powerful exercise that when I did this, as I described it to you, it wasn't very long before I actually started receiving acknowledgement in those forms. People actually started acknowledging me A, B, C. I'm not going to say the actual ways because it's a little, feels a little personal, but I started receiving it. These really, really wonderful compliments. But then the kicker was that every time I'd receive those compliments, it was because I had embodied it so completely, and because I had given myself so much permission to embody these starting now, and because I was insourcing my authority by saying, yes, I am this thing. I don't need somebody out there to tell me that I'm this thing. Then by definition, when people came into my life to tell me that I'm this thing, it was meaningless. It was like the equivalent of somebody telling me that I'm a man, or that I'm a human being, or that I'm a Canadian. There was of course I wouldn't, externally, it's like, great gratitude, thank you, appreciation. That's such a nice thing to say. But inside, there's this peculiar effect of like, I know, I know, I don't need you to tell me. So this is possible for you. And it's such a flip. It's such a flip that nobody gets, but now you can get. So many, and you can see this now. Think about all the people you know in your life who go their whole lives trying to connive and trying to receive a particular type of compliment, when all you ever had to do was claim your own authority, become that thing, give it to yourself, insource your authority, and then ultimately just through the energy that you emanate, you start teaching everybody else to view you the same way, because you're no longer giving this permission away to somebody else to give back to you. And you realize how meaningless it is when somebody acknowledges you in a particular way. Like it's nice. It really is nice. And it is affirming, especially in the beginning, but it stops becoming so affirming. Because you realize there's nothing that you can get from anybody else that's of true value. And then the more you realize that, the more this becomes apparent to you, the more you can move steadfastly or really congruently in this direction of releasing this need to have a self or to have yourself be seen in a particular way. And then it becomes so much more of a priority, whereas before it was about image construction and success and safety in the tribe, safety amongst people, bolstering your position in the world. All of that starts to be replaced with a whole new handful of priorities, such as truth and honesty, telling the truth about yourself. Sharing your vulnerabilities, sharing your interior. it's funny because you can see, if you look out in art, if you look out in music, you'll see there's a certain section of music that's devoted to positioning of the self, where we could summarize the entire message down to, look at how much higher and better I am than you. And some of it, of course, is very sincere. And then, of course, some of it's just like tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of funny and whatever. And sometimes it's a mix. And, you know, and then there's other types of music that are focused on honesty. Focusing on expressing their vulnerabilities. And it's this kind of music where when you listen to it, it's not like the first category where it's like, yeah, I'm the best, you know, DJ Khaled, we're the best music, right? But instead, it's about, wow, like, I feel seen. Somebody's speaking about their vulnerabilities, about their struggle, about their worry, about their humanness. Not that it all has to be negative. It can also be about, you know, the positive feelings of love and happiness or whatever else, but the relatability of all of it, and the humanness of it, and about how the artist is not trying to differentiate themselves from other people in the form of being above or separate or unique or special, but instead is a willingness to be totally ordinary. And it's this kind of art that has that healing quality that I was talking about, because when you express your interior, not your face, not your bravado, not your success, but when you express your interior to the world, and somebody listens to it and discovers their own interior in your interior, then there's a communing that happens. There's a union. There's a sense of love through that unity. Story time. It's a long story, and I'm thinking about how deep I want to go into it. I'll save the bulk of it for a different day, but we were in Spain, Jessica and I, and we ran into some very serious trouble. Some of it involved the law. Some of it involved fighting off. In Spain, there's this squatters' rights rule where people, like, if you're not in a particular building, then people can come in and occupy it. And I think it's something like if they can be there for 24 hours, then they get to keep it according to Spanish law. This is really, really a thing. Like, you can look it up. It's a real thing. And so we were house sitting in Spain, and we had to stay there because people were actually, like, in the periphery of the property trying to get in if they ever saw us leave. And it got really scary. And then eventually the people we were house sitting for came home, but then, like, we had to leave because there was no room for us anymore. And so we had to leave. And so we were just absolutely traumatized, absolutely scared. I had never felt so scared in my life, just completely. I felt alone and uncertain, and just like I just felt so unsafe in my own experience, in my body. And we were just kind of waiting for our flight home in a different town, next one over. And there was some music that was being played. And so it's like, okay, let's go check it out. So we went to go check out this music, and nobody was singing, but there was a band, and this guitarist, this big kind of guy, huge, powerful presence emanating from him, and amazing guitar work. He was very, very skilled, very talented. And the room was filled with these really safe, warm, loving energies. And I was standing there watching this guy play, and he was channeling from such a deep place in himself, and there was just such a lack of difference between him and his own music. He was just so lost in it that I felt safe in his presence. This man has no idea the impact, how much I needed that music, how much I needed that live performance. I don't know who he is, I don't know what the band is, he has no idea who I am, but he's left this indelible mark on me by channeling this music from deep inside of himself. I felt loved, I felt safe, I felt cared for. I was better coming home after that. I felt like, okay, I felt a little bit more in control. Still scared, but I felt a little bit more in control. Self-permission means claiming something that has value. So permitting yourself to create something and then looking at it and saying, this is valuable. So what we were talking about earlier about you deciding what you are and making decisions with your own authority about yourself, regardless of what anybody else says or thinks, you decide for yourself. So do you also put that on your work? Producing something. Could you imagine, for example, producing a poem and looking at that poem and saying, this poem is value. This is a good poem. You should read this poem. Could you imagine saying that? Or would you write a poem and either just shove it into the graveyard or the deep archives of your own hard drive, or maybe post it somewhere and tell nobody, and maybe you'll like come back to it like 3 months later and see that like 3 or 4 people have seen it and there's like no comments or anything on it. And that's all you do with your poetry. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, you can. I have a friend who just creates tons and tons of music, loves the music making process, and is uninterested in publishing it. And God bless him. But are you willing to create something and put it out into the world and say, this is value? Would you give it permission to be valuable, to be valued by others? Would you give yourself permission to see it as a contribution to the world? And finally, as you can see, I didn't mention, I'm making a 5-point list. Imposter syndrome. This is a way of undoing imposter syndrome. So when we're talking about self-permission, we're talking about, well, whatever. Yeah, you get it. It's all good. So a few things that you can try. If you're listening thus far and you're sold on the whole thing, you're like, yes, like this sounds good. It makes sense. I want it. I want to activate this. There are a few ways that you can do it. I really like repeat after me's. I'm inspired by Matt Kahn, the YouTube speaker, K-A-H-N, Matt Kahn. He will almost always include a repeat after me in his, and they're very valuable because, as far as I can tell, when somebody gives you words to say with your voice, to practice with your mouth and your vocal cords, it teaches your unconscious mind, just for a minute, how to vibrate in a particular way. And then in that moment, the unconscious mind can experience it, and then coming out of it, it can decide what of it that it likes, what of it that is valuable, what of it, of this content will take it towards its own goals, and it can pick and choose and turn it into its own individualized thing. And so in a similar way, I would like to give you one. So this first one will have to do with, it's not about your work, but it's about you personally. It goes as follows. I give permission to the world to see me as it sees me. I give permission to the world to have whatever impression of me it does. I give permission to the world to perceive me as it perceives me. I give permission to everyone to have whatever opinion they have. I love all opinions and I'm partial to none. I love all perspectives and I'm partial to none. I let the world have its perceptions. And as of this moment, I drop and resolve all conflict against it. I hereby drop and resolve all effort against it. I hereby drop all schemes and campaigns against managing anybody's perception of me. And from the world and from all beings, I reclaim my authority now to say what I am, to have space for me in the world. This is my space. I claim this space. This space is my space. And there we are. So take a minute to feel. How does that feel? So now when it comes to expressing your work out in the world, I'm going to give you another exercise. This is not a repeat after me in this case, but this is a way for you to unblock yourself if you find yourself blocked in the creative process. So remember, what we are the most interested in here is that which you feel is in you to express, that which you are most likely to procrastinate. There's always this very, very direct correlation between the stuff that we're really here to do in the world and the thing that we are waiting the longest to do. And it's always like doing all these other side missions and doing all other sorts of things before we actually do the main thing that we're here to do. And when it comes time to do the thing that we're here to do, generally before long it starts to become scary, and then we start running into this inner critic thing that creates friction as we're doing it. So here's a way to unblock yourself. This is the most powerful and direct method that I'm aware of. As you're in the middle of creating your blog post, your Reddit post, your YouTube video, your TikTok video, your song, insert your thing here, and you're making it, and you feel yourself slowing down, and you're getting into reluctance, and procrastination is becoming really challenging. Pay attention to what you're concerned your art may end up becoming. So what is the inner critic in you trying to prevent happen to your art? In other words, is the inner critic trying to make sure that your work isn't cringy or embarrassing or unoriginal or boring or overly stimulating, overly intense, or too much of this or too much of that, too much like this person, too much like that? What are you afraid will happen to your art, according to the critic, if the critic isn't completely vigilant and is monitoring all the time? So write that down, clarify what that is, and then on purpose, make your art that. Make it cringy, make it embarrassing, make it lame, make it stupid, make it dumb, make it boring, make it too short, too long, too basic, too complicated. Make it that thing. This achieves a lot of things all at once. A major thing that it achieves is that you're just sort of, it's almost like this energy that you're trying to pull, you just push it the other way through. There's a big unclogging of the drain. It's like, just get it done. What you end up making as a result, if you really on purpose do this, go right down the barrel, make it bad, lame, terrible, make it a failure, make it a disappointment, make it a waste of your time, whatever it is, what you'll likely find, I have to be quiet because Isabel's sleeping. What you'll find is that there's a small chance that it might turn out bad in the way you envisioned. And in that case, at minimum, you will have unclogged the pipes. And then if you go to create your next thing, you'll actually find it much more fluid. And then if you do, keep repeating this process, keep pushing out all the bad stuff. Just keep pushing it all out. And until it becomes just so much more comfortable to create something. What you'll much more likely find, though, is that what you make actually ends up being value. Because whatever it is that you're trying not to make it, let's just say overly complicated, because you're so conscious about not making something that's complicated, you're likely to err way excessively over on the other end, being overly simple. And therefore, if you just relax that contraction, then you'll be able to come to center. It's not like you're suddenly going to make your shit overly complicated. It's probably going to be right down the middle. Generally speaking, you are capable, like what you're going to make is value. I really mean this. If you get out of your own way and relax the inner critic and just allow the thing to be produced, it ends up being value because you are a source of value. And that's how to unblock yourself. That's how to push the stuff through. And then from there, like, yes, there's still improvement. You still get better, still refine your technique, put something out there. You'll find that there's stuff that you want to correct for the next one. But then now you're just in the process of every other artist, every other creator, everywhere in the world. You're doing what everybody's doing. It's like you make something, you look at it, think of, learn a lesson from it, get feedback from it, apply that lesson, apply that feedback, and onward and upward you go into greater success, greater individuation. So that's it. I think that's what I came here to say. I'm just looking at all my notes. Allow people to think what they're going to think. Notice where you're afraid of judgment. Anywhere there's fear of somebody's judgment, again, all this will represent is that you've put somebody above you. You've put somebody's opinion to be more important than your own. And all of this is false. So if you've done this in your life, just become aware of it. Bring awareness to it, attention. You got bamboozled. You actually fell prey to this idea that somebody is above you, that somebody's opinion of you is more valid than your own. It's okay. It happens to all of us. Practice giving yourself permission, receiving from yourself permission to exist, to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to participate, and to value and be valued. Practice pushing out the energy the other way. Practice pushing it through the block, allowing your art to be this thing that you're afraid it might become. Demonstrate to yourself through this exercise that at the very end of the day, it actually doesn't end up being that thing, and that your fears of it ending up complicated, cringy, bad, whatever, are unwarranted. And then through this practice, you'll find it easier and easier to create, allow your creations to be seen. And this is the true upward spiral of the prolific creator. This is a key component to sustainable high-level productivity. Thank you for watching. Join my email list for a 5-day video course on sustainable high-level productivity, all for free. Go to my website for that, brentharris.com. If you would like one-on-one coaching, you can get a session for $5. There's a link for that below. I will work with you directly to help make this happen, to bring all of this to life for you. If you want further guidance, please hit like on this video. Please consider subscribing and leaving a comment if you learned something, and let me know what you've learned. Thank you.